We are continuing our discussion on white picket fences, and we know that when we have set out to dream about this dream home that we were going to have, we didn't realize how hard it was going to be, because we went off and married another person that had a strong self-will, and then in addition you start to have kids, and those kids come into your life and they have these strong self-wills also. And then all of a sudden, this dream home you have starts to fall apart because there's fighting and quarreling and contention. Well, what we want to talk about today is a way to bring repairs to your home. Now, I am the worst person if you have any repairs you need done to your home in terms of fixing things. In fact, if I touch anything, it then gets more expensive. I don't know, I have the Midas touch in that sense, especially for the repairmen and plumbers out there. They love me. It's like, Troy, go and try to fix it yourself, because that just means more money for me. If you see me on the side of the road and you're broken down, just wave me by, because once I start tinkering with your engine, it's going to cost you more. I have just found things like light bulbs, which have been so simple, it would think, right? And I'm good because I'm 6'6" and I have an 8'2" reach, and so light bulbs are my thing, and I was born to change light bulbs. But I don't know what it is. Somehow I stripped the light bulb, and I'm standing there with the metal, and the filament is still inside, and I'm risking electrocution by trying to get that one end out of there, and then I just break the whole thing. So do not ask me about these things, but when it comes to the other things within our homes, I do know as a homeowner that there is one thing you need, and it's a toolbox. So I brought a toolbox with me. I tried to bring my regular one, but it was broken. And it was actually rusted because it hadn't been opened in so long, so I couldn't use that. But why do the cracks and things develop around our home? A number of reasons. It's just neglect. Maybe it's something is happening in a place you can't see. Maybe it's just disrepair that occurs over time, right? It's a law of thermodynamics, I think, why things just fall apart and go from order to chaos. And so that happens in our homes. Sometimes it's just inexperience. You don't know how to fix things, and so they don't get fixed. They don't get fixed properly. Sometimes it's acts of God. I mean, trees drop their branches on your roof, or hail falls from the sky. I mean, whatever it might be, that causes the damage. Sometimes it's just selfishness. Some people just say, I got something else I'd rather do than go fix the house. I know that needs to get fixed. I see the honey-do list, but you know what? I'm going to do something instead. And then lawns go, without being cut for a month or whatever it might be, or the garages don't get cleaned up, and things begin to fall apart. Well, those same exact reasons happen in our homes in terms of our relationships with one another. Neglect, not paying attention to the places that need to be fixed. Inexperience, maybe you're new at this whole marriage thing and you don't know what it is that you need to do. Certain acts of God occur that shake up the house. It could be medical reports, right? It could be economic situations, things that you don't have a control of that happen outside of your control. And you know what? It could be just a natural deterioration and not paying attention and constantly going to the places of need and trying to strengthen them. And so for those reasons, I want to bring you a toolbox of things so that you can use in your life. You can even start today and begin to apply some of these things so that where the families, where there's fracturing and where there's cracks, you can start making the repairs as soon as you leave this place. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about, yes, spouse to spouse, of course, but I'm also talking about parent to child. And there may be some places there that need repair. Well, we're going to go to the best resource that I know, and that's, of course, the Word of God. But we're going to go specifically to James. So in whatever way you turn to that, whether it's electronically or by paper, go to the book of James. And I'm going to start with something, a perspective of all this that you may not think. And because James starts out this way, I want us to have this mindset before we start. And James starts in chapter 1, verse 2. He says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." Boy, I know what you're going through right now, and the first thing you wouldn't expect to hear is, wow, I got to think of that as something joyful, because it doesn't feel like joy on my end. Well, James says when you're going through a trial, consider it joy and say, you know what? Something good could come out of this. And he says the testing of your faith brings about perseverance. You can't have a persevering faith unless you go through a trial. And if your relationship and your family is going through a trial, what a great time to learn about perseverance. He goes on in that verse to talk about other things. He talks about wisdom and maturity and more faith. That if you keep on pressing on through whatever difficulty it may be, you're going to get something good out of this. So he says, don't give up now. Continue to grow and to learn. In James 1:12, he says, you can get through this. He says, blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. He's saying there is life at the end of the tunnel. You may be in a dark place, but don't stay there. Look ahead, persevere, press on, and receive that life at the end. If you give up now, something will die. And it may be a relationship, or it may be your faith, because you said, oh God, I have done all these things and look what's happened. Nothing, so I guess I can't trust you anymore. But God had said, if you just persevered and you just moved on, you would have seen what I could do. So here are a couple things in the toolbox that you need to pull out. The first one is find the problem. Find the problem. You know, I had a leak in the house. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this. It's probably one of the worst things is you hear water running in the house somewhere and you don't know where it is. You've turned off every spigot and you're going, where's this coming from? So I called in a plumber, and the plumber came in and he looked around the house and listened, and he says, you need to replumb the whole house. Replumb the whole house. He had something down in the foundation, and we're going to have to start all over again. He says, we're going to run the pipes up through your attic and the whole thing. Well, what's that going to cost? About $2,000. I don't have $2,000. So I felt terrible. So what did? I got another opinion. And this guy comes over and immediately hears the problem. And what does he do? He pulls out a stethoscope. I thought I was getting a checkup with this. I was like, wow, this is a good deal. You know, I'm getting the house fixed and my heart rate, checked, which at the moment was pretty high. And he begins to listen on the floor. He goes outside of the house and he goes, yeah, you got a leak right here in the pipe that's heading to your outdoor garden hose. Wow. He chips away. You see the water going, leaking through, and it's how much is that going to cost? It's like $500. Wow. The other people are about to come in and just throw everything out and start over. But he said, no, if you go right to the source, you see it's a very simple fix, and it's not going to cost you that much. So out of the toolbox, I want to take a magnifying glass. Because sometimes we need a magnifying glass in order to magnify what that problem is. And many people, when they come to me, they say, well, let me tell you what the problem is. Well, James says, let me tell you one place where it's not the problem. James 1:13 says, when tempted, no one should say, well, God is tempting me, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil and enticed. So first of all, don't blame God. God, it's your fault that I'm married to this person. Or God, it's your fault that we're in this situation. Don't start there. The problem in every relationship comes down to this: selfishness. Selfishness, that's what he said right there, selfishness. It's our own evil desires. Now, maybe the selfishness of one person is a lot greater than the selfishness of the other person. That other person may be tempted by things like alcohol or another person, or by what their friends are doing and saying, and they're drawn in that direction. And that may be the case. But in every situation I've found, it's always both persons' fault. In some way, both people have caused what has happened. So I say take the magnifying glass and begin to look around in your own life and look at your own heart and say, where is this? Where have I caused problems here? Because when you come in to me or Jason and say, well, let me tell you all the things that are going on, we can't fix the problem. Why? Because the other person isn't there. But we can start with you. And so now when people come in and they want to start unloading, and by the way, we don't get paid by the hour. I know a psychologist wants you to do that so they can make more money. I've begun to go saying, okay, well, write down 5 things you've done wrong. They're shocked. What? I've done wrong. No, it's all their fault. No, let's start with you because you can fix. So let's not replumb the whole thing, right? Let's start with you. And immediately it's sort of shocking. But as people begin to look at themselves and say, what have I done wrong here? They can begin the process of fixing. Bring the other person in and we'll talk to them and give them the same thing. But it starts with you. So pull out the magnifying glass and look at your own heart. Even Jesus talked about this. He says, boy, we're so good at going around and trying to remove the specks from other people's eyes, but we got a 2x4 in our own eye. He says, remove that first, and then you can see more clearly the problems in other people. So once we deal with our own situation, confess it, bring it before God, and then we can go about bringing healing to that situation. The second thing is handle with care. You know, as being a frustrated home repair person, my first thought always, especially with like ceiling fans, because you're always sort of dangling there and you're up high and you got the screwdriver and everything is all above your head. And you know that when you get that one screw out, it's always going to fall and it's going to roll under something like 5 miles away and you got to go find it. And it just gets so frustrating. My first thought is, if I tear the ceiling fan from the wall and I throw it across the room and then I begin to stomp on it and beat on it with a sledgehammer, then it will learn its lesson. Because we know that ceiling fans and other things in our homes have souls and that they will repent once you tell them what they've done wrong. Idiotic, isn't it? That's my first thought. Get angry here and then I can solve this situation. I cause more problems. James says this, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. I tried to look around the house for something that was, handled with care-ish, and you don't find a lot of, soft and nice things around all that hardware. And the best I could find was this cold chisel, as kind of being the opposite. And this is the way we deal with a lot of our relationships, with a cold chisel. A chisel's only job is to break apart and to split. And by our anger and everything, we take these sort of things and we just ram them into the relationship. And because of our reaction and the way we act, and James is saying right here, we break apart the relationship more when we're trying to deal with it. So he says this, and it's 1 quick and 2 slows. Quick to listen. So if someone is speaking to you, the first thing should be, I want to hear what you have to say. And I'm talking with spouse to spouse, and I'm talking parent to children too. Parents, listen to your kids. And kids, listen to your parents. You know why? Because they were once your age, and they made all the mistakes that you made or you're about to make. They're kind of smart in some of those areas. And so sometimes be quick to listen to what they have to say. And then the other thing is to be slow talker, slow to respond in any sort of emotion. Hold it back. You don't want to drive a cold chisel through the relationship. So for some of you, try silence instead of speeches. Try silence and just listen. Here are all the things you need to do, and let me give you a complete assessment of where you're wrong. Silence. It's also saying try kindness instead of anger. Anger never helps. Throwing the ceiling fan across the room only destroys the wall or something else. Then I got to get a new ceiling fan. Then I got to fix the wall. Just more and more problems. Try compliments instead of put downs. And it doesn't work if you say, oh, you're so cute when you get angry. That's not one. But you know what? Sometimes finding in a person, if you're listening, right? If you're listening, you can say, you know what? I understand now why you're so passionate about this. Or I understand why you love the kids so much. Or I can understand why you want to do the things that your friends want to do. Because you have a real heart for them. If you try to find something good in it, people get less defensive. They're like, oh, you kind of understand what I'm going through or what I'm thinking? Yeah, I understand. Let's see if we can find a solution to that. And when you see the way some people treat each other, they treat their kids, or they treat spouses, treat each other, I've got to really ask, are you really a Christian? I mean, really? I mean, the way is you put down your spouse, the way you put down your kids, and the way you're mean to them at times. I mean, where did you get that? It wasn't from the Bible. The only time Jesus was mad at somebody was a religious leader. So I guess you can get mad at Jason and I and Chuck, all right? That's the only sort of thing you can find anything in the Bible about that. But for one another, it's all about kind words. It's all about being nice. It's all about being edifying. It's all about lifting up the other person. Why doesn't that seem to work in the homes? We understand what it means at work or it means at school, but we get in the home. No. Those verses don't apply. Absolutely they do. We need to be quick to listen and slow to be angry. If you want to talk about the tongue, James has nothing good to say about the tongue. Read that passage in James 3. He talks about it just being a small rudder of the boat, small part of the body. He says, but it can set your life ablaze. He says, there is nobody that can seem to be able to control that tongue. And he says, you know what? Both fresh water and salt water do not come out of the same spring. So how come cursing comes out and praises? You just sang praises, but you get in your car and you start cursing your spouse? Whoa! You know, it's like the hot and cold spigot. You do control how much hot and cold. You understand that, right? You can. I do understand some things about home repair. You can control that. And you know what? You can control that in your own life. And sometimes you just may need to turn off those hot, scalding words and turn on those cool, refreshing words instead. That's the best solution. You can start with that today. The other thing is to get expert advice. Get expert advice. You know, every time you buy something, you get one of these. And I'm sure most of you, especially you guys, we all sit down right after we get this with a cup of coffee, and we go, this is some good reading. I want to read all about this leaf blower I bought, and oh, look, I can learn other languages like Portuguese and Spanish, and this is going to be such a good time. No, we don't look at this, right? We throw this aside. When do we pick it up? When it's broken, right? We don't get, and it says in here, don't do this, don't do that. Yeah, we didn't listen to that. We know what's best. But you know what? We got to get expert advice sometimes. We got to go to someone like a mom or a dad or a neighbor, or someone you trust, or your small group leader, and going to them and saying, I got this thing going on. Can you help me? I need to hear from somebody outside of this situation. And when you hear what he has to say in James, you know exactly the kind of person you need to listen to. And in James 3:14, he says, but if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. So if you're getting selfish advice from someone and they're saying, oh, you need to find your own happiness, you need to do your own thing, or oh, it's all about you, you don't listen to that. In fact, James says this is what you listen to. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere, peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. If that advice that's coming to you is talking about reconciliation, is talking about mercy, is talking about being impartial, that's the one that you need to listen to. So listen to those experts' advice, not your friends, not your girlfriends. There's so many people say, I've talked to all my girlfriends, and all my girlfriends say I should leave you. Your girlfriends only hear one side of the story, right? Your girlfriends are probably suffering through the same thing and don't know how to handle it themselves. So go to an expert who's impartial, who gives you that kind of wisdom. The next thing is apply. Apply. You know, after you've gotten all this information and you know what it is you need to do, you need to apply it. Now, I know this, that if I take a can of paint and set it by the fence, that paint will not get on that fence by itself. Yeah, guess what? I have to actually, and if I read the instructions, I have to actually pick it up, shake it, it says that on here too, pop open the top and then begin to push the nozzle so that the paint comes out and applies it to the place that I want to be fixed. So when you hear the things that you need to do, it's not going to work unless you apply it. James says in 2:24, you see the person is considered righteous by what they do and not by faith alone. In James 1:22, he says, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. do something. Do what it says. So if you love someone, it's not that you're receiving all this information that goes into your head, or maybe it goes into your heart, but it needs to come out in some way in your actions. And it may be for some of you as simple as a physical touch. When there's divisions, there seems to be a lack of physicality between the two. And it may be just as simple as holding a hand or putting an arm around someone or maybe a hug. Some sort of physical touch that occurs that says, hey, I'm still here, I'm still in it, I'm still with you, we're still connected. It's not a sexual sort of thing, it's just a gentle, loving touch. The other is we see that Jesus healed people through touch. All the time he's touching people and they're being healed. That's the power of touch. The other is that we maybe at times just need to be with each other and do something nice for them, taking them out to dinner, getting the family together, actually doing something together. Family night, whatever it might be. So when you receive the expert advice and you know the things you need to do, as we're talking about here today, you need to go apply it. The next thing is use strong glue. Use strong glue. This is not strong glue. Elmer's, not strong. Right? I was afraid to bring the Gorilla Glue because I've used Gorilla Glue before, and all day I was going around like this. Couldn't get them apart. Everyone's like, is everything okay? I'm like, yeah, it's okay. Right? It's good stuff. What do we need to stick to during these times? What do we need to stick together? The first and most important thing is that we stick to God. James 4 says this, you do not have because you do not ask God. When you ask, you do not receive because you ask with the wrong motives. Don't be quick to go and tell all your friends all the problems. The first place you should go is go to God and stick close to him in prayer during that time. The other is that while you're praying with that person, it's hard to hate that person while you're praying for them. Because you're standing before a God who is telling you need to pray with the right motives. It's also beneficial if you actually pray with that person. It's hard for there to be any sort of division when you take the hand of that person and the two of you begin to pray together. And that may be what some of you need today. That as you go home tonight, and fathers and men, you're the spiritual leaders here, you need to take that first step. If there's any sort of division, is to pray tonight with that person. The next thing is let dry for 24 hours. Let dry for 24 hours. This is a patch for the roof. And I needed the magnifying glass to see this on here, but it actually says here, apply, and then let sit for 24 hours. Well, good luck on a roof in Florida, right, with all the rain we get. But in order to work properly, it needs to be dry for 24 hours. And sometimes we try to push these situations too quickly. We've done all the things that we need to do, and we expect instant results, and that's not the case. We need to let it set for a period of time. James 5, he's talking through verses 7 through 11, the word keeps coming up, be patient and wait, patiently waiting, be patient. Example of patience. He keeps talking about patience during that time. And so don't expect overnight results. Take all the things that you've done, the prayer, the application, the things that you're doing, and let it sit for a while. And as you do, you begin to see the bond growing closer. And you begin to see it strengthen as you continue to do those things. But don't do anything rash. Don't say, oh, I'm out of here. Put a waiting period on some of those rash things that you want to do until you see if these promises that God has will actually work in your life. So far we've seen this. To fix the cracks in your home, you need to find the problem. Start with you. Handle with care, right? Listen. Don't speak so quickly. Get expert advice. Talk to others. Apply, do something nice, physical touch. Stick to God through prayer and patience. Don't be too rash. The last thing on that list is use nails to hold it together. This is the best nail that I could find in my, amongst all my hardware that I had. It was pretty good. I think if you had a couple 2x4s, this would do the job. This would hold it together. And as I look at that nail, I think, what would that nail feel like if it was put right here? It would hold you to the cross, wouldn't it? And this is why Jesus died. Jesus died and nailed himself to the cross so that we could experience the relationships with God. If you look in James 4, he says, come near to God in verse 8, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts. We can't do that unless Jesus Christ died on the cross. We can't come near to God unless he had broken down the separation between us and God. We can't have a pure heart unless he has forgiven us and cleansed us of his sins. So he knows well these nails, and we should too. And Jesus didn't die on the cross so that we can have an affair. And Jesus didn't die on the cross so that we can be mean to one another. And he didn't die on the cross so that you could hate your parents. He died on the cross so that there would be reconciliation, that we would first of all come close to God. And then as a result of us coming close to God and learning the things that we've learned with our relationship with God, is applying them to each other. And so that's why we're doing communion today. And communion is about life. And communion is about forgiveness. And communion is about love. And it's all the things that we need in our homes today. So as we take the communion, let us first think about our homes also, and think about what kind of repairs we need to make there and what Christ has done for us.